welcome to the literature of today and yesterday. My name is Jeremy Wadsworth, and today we will be exploring The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. We have Nathaniel Hawthorne here for an interview today, and we have a special announcement and some surprise guests. Now, until then, let us welcome Mr. Hawthorne. It's okay if I call you Nate? How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you. And yes, you can call me Nate.
That's good to know. So, we're going to be talking about The Scarlet Letter for all of you out there. How about you tell us a little more about what else you've written? Maybe just a little promo?
Well, I've written such materials such as A Belle's Biography, The House of Seven Gables, The Twice Told Tales, and finally, The Scarlet Letter.
Yeah, all quite respectable works. Today's topic? The Scarlet Letter. Even before we start on that, how about we get some more info? On you.
Oh yes, I was born in Salem, Massachusetts in 1804. I died, however, in 1864 due to body failure.
But why are you here now? So, how was your upbringing? Any hardships? Anything significant that you think all these people should know?
Oh yes, my father, you see, was a sea captain. He went out to the sea, however, in 1808 and was killed by the storm. And ever since then, my mother was left to take care of me and my two sisters. Wanting to live in seclusion, my mother moved out to Maine with all three of us. And I established my life in Maine ever since. In 1821 to 1824, I went to Bowdoin College and graduated there. And after graduating, I wrote for several periodicals and newspapers. However, my dream was to become a novelist. But my career did not start very smoothly. Heavily rejected by the public and by the publishers. I was so upset up to the point that I personally burned all the unsold books. I was very frustrated. You see, you can tell by that. But however, in 1837, a miracle happened. I wrote The Twice Told Tales, and it was well received by the public. I was so excited. My status was more and more well respected by the publishers as well, and I became more and more successful as a novelist. And because of that, in 1842, I married Sophia Peabody.
Good job on your career, Nate. I mean, that's some good turnaround, isn't it? But I want to change the topic a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about your ancestors.
Oh no, those people.
Yes, those people. How about you tell us a little bit more about them? I mean, I've heard some rumors, but is it actually true that one of them was a judge in the Salem witch trials?
Yes. I am a descendant of John Hawthorne, who was one of the 3 judges in the Salem witch trial in 1692. He martyred so many women accused of being witches up until the point that his hands were covered with their bloods. Now, I am so ashamed of his deeds.
I can't imagine being proud of that. I mean, oof. That actually leads me to something. Did you actually ever return back to Salem?
Although I had left Salem as a young boy, however, I still felt a huge affection towards this once thriving city. My ancestors were all buried on the grounds of the city, and I couldn't bear to separate myself from the place that I was born in. Therefore, along with my 2 kids and my wife, I moved back to Salem and was shocked to find the city much more decayed than before. Since I couldn't support my growing family as a writer anymore, I worked hard to become the surveyor of the port of Salem, overlooking the shipping business.
Now, that's pretty interesting. Now let's talk about how you were inspired to write The Scarlet Letter.
Well, one day after I finished my work, I decided to explore the Custom House, which was the building that I worked in. I went to a pile of rubbish on the corner, and I don't know, I had a desire to look through it, and eventually I found a scarlet letter that had that letter A with a commission note by the former surveyor, Jonathan Pugh. It described some events, and I decided to write a novel about those events in greater detail. Finding this note was so awesome. It was as if I saw the actual ghost of Pugh telling me to write the story of Hester Prynne. And he also told me that I could have all the financial benefits from writing this book. This was so important to me, because my writing at that time couldn't support my growing family. And the economy was so bad, kind of like now, the opportunity was presented. Well, I just couldn't pass it up.
So it's true. You're crazy. Just joking. But it was just a letter. This is a whole book. How did you manage it? Can it be assumed that much of this book is fictional?
Yes. And I just have to say no as well. I agree. Much of the book is fictional, including most of the conversations and events. Those actually happened. I try to write the story as much confined to the time of the note and also the letter. But the characterization and the imagery and everything but the actual events, that I had to come up with. And that stuff that I had knowledge from because of my Puritan family ties. The events are based on the note.
So some of the events in the book are influenced by your feelings?
Some of them.
Well, there you have it, folks. If you want to know more about Nate Hawthorne, read The Scarlet Letter.
Now don't do that, Jeremy. Now they're gonna think every little criticism in that book is my own.
But aren't they? It's your book.
Many of the morals and ideas in there. Can I have a book, please?
I'm sorry. Thank you, brother. Here you go. And here are from the time.
You must remember that I had the book finished before I magically appeared. There are some ideas in this book of my ideas of some of the people. You must realize that I don't like the events that took place in Salem, but I don't hate it. It's my home.
True. So you would say the book has current events in it?
Yes, but it was still before my time, though.
So can we assume that the public consensus didn't change much over the century that it took for someone to find the letter?
Absolutely not. I like to believe progress has been made morally since during the time of the book. And I estimate the letter to be, and the notes to be written around late 1600s. More than a century, duh.
It's no letter. Wow. So the time around the letter, when the letter was written, was it different than your time?
Yes. I try to keep the events in the book confined to the time that the note was written about the letter. I never tried to modernize it at all.
Okay, enough about that. So how about we talk a little about the plot of your newest novel, Scarlet Letter. It's available online and in bookstores near you.
Do you really have to promote it like that?
Yeah, I kind of have to read the teleprompter, especially since I'm not allowed to go off script anymore since that one time. Also, your publisher did pay us a lot of money. Apparently money makes the world go round. Who'd have thought? Oh well, back to your book. Tell us a little more about it.
Well, the book starts out about a year after the main character, Hester Prynne, had intercourse with another man. 9 months later, she gave birth to a daughter, and she was thrown in jail for adultery. She is, in the first scene, paraded through the marketplace. Her punishment for adultery is that she has to wear a letter A in scarlet on the front, which I described as being a letter in scarlet with gold embroidery around and on it. Coincidentally, I found this exact letter with the note in the custom house. It actually happened. Anyways, it has to stand on a pedestal about a man's shoulder height above the ground for 3 hours.
Can I make a quick observation? It is my observation that, having read the book, Hester is very skilled at the needle and...
Yes, of course. Hester has used her skill to embroider the area around the A to majestic beauty. Even the people disgusted with her actions are amazed, seeing as they thought that Hester would be gloomy, dirty, and sad.
What do you think of the occurrence here today?
Hester should be more ashamed. This woman has brought shame upon us all and ought to die. Is there no law for it? Truly there is, in both the scripture, and also the statute book. Then let the magistrates thank themselves if their own wives and daughters go astray.
At the very least, they should have put the brand of hot iron on Hester Prynne's forehead. But she, the naughty baggage, little will she care what they put upon the bodice of her gown. Why, look you, she may cover it with a brooch, and so she can walk the streets as brave as ever.
Ah, but let her cover the mark as she will. The pang of it will always be in her heart.
But, quite opposite, while Hester was greatly ashamed, she had huge pride for her work and a very strong spine. Her strength of character in that scene is amazing. The Reverend Dimmesdale even attempted, with some very powerful and moving words, to motivate Hester to give up the name of the father of the child. Hester, however, refused.
Let's skip forward a little bit. This is where a man comes in to visit Hester in jail.
Of course, this is quite crucial to the beginnings of the plot. The man that sees Hester, if any of you didn't know, is her husband.
So just to clarify, Hester's husband, in this story referred to as Roger Chillingworth, note the name, used to live in England. And he sent her ahead to America, where she lived for about 2 years. And during that time, because he didn't show up, she thought he was dead. So she had the affair, and she had the baby. And baby's about 3 months old when Roger comes into the jail.
Then, in the marketplace scene, Hester sees this man. This man sees Hester. An intense horror fills the man. And then it's gone. Hester is then taken back into the jail, where the baby all of a sudden becomes very sick. The town calls in Roger to come in.
Now, people, this is quite a complicated plot.
Yes, yes.
Now, I think the first part of the novel is all about description. Is it not?
One would think.
Because of useless babble.
Well, it's not all useless. I admit, I might have rambled for a little bit.
Quite a bit.
Of course. But then I came to some good parts. The novel skips to Hester.
With a chapter most properly named, Hester at her needle.
Of course. During this chapter.
You ramble.
There's some good stuff in there. I described Hester's talent in embroidery.
How everybody in town wants Hester to embroider their things, and how her talent is incredible, but that nobody asks her to embroider wedding clothes.
Of course, for the obvious reason.
I want to skip to Pearl. Pearl is Hester's little girl.
Yes, and she is Hester's pride and joy. Hester doesn't buy good clothes for herself, but for Pearl, she buys the most exquisite things and then embroiders them.
Make a note, she is a tomboy.
Yes, she is. She is quite the tomboy. I also say that if Pearl's public or on any other girl, they would diminish that girl's beauty.
And with that sentence, you both show how good Hester's embroidery is and how beautiful Pearl is. But then you say that when playing, Pearl has clothes like Hester on.
And I again emphasize how beautiful Pearl is by saying that even the muddy clothes that Pearl wears to play, they don't make her look bad.
Now, why is that?
I state that to make a point that from bad actions don't have to come bad things.
But you don't necessarily like what Hester did. You always say that Hester is crazily skilled, and then you go straight into condemning her actions. You also do that with Pearl. There's always that 50-50 ratio. You state Pearl is majestic, and then you call her a product of sin, a freak, an alien. You can't have one without the other.
That's my way of being unhappy with Hester, though. Even though she committed adultery, she isn't such a bad person.
So earlier on, we talked about how the book is being based on an actual letter, a real-life note that somebody wrote years and years ago. Is this your way of being unhappy with your family or with the person in the letter, the actual book?
Yes, absolutely. I never liked my family much. I didn't have a good childhood.
How about we skip forward a little bit to, say, another critical scene? The scene is when Hester brings some gloves to the Governor Billingham, correct?
Yes, of course. Hester brings the gloves when it's found out that the minister and the Reverend Dimmesdale intend to take Pearl away from her. She goes with the intent to dissuade them of that, however.
Your gloves, sire.
Thank you, Hester Prynne. There hath been much question concerning thee of late. The point hath been weightily discussed whether we, that are of authority and influence, do well discharge our consciences by trusting an immortal soul, such as yonder child, to the guidance of one who hath stumbled and fallen.
God gave me the child. Mr. Dimmesdale, speak thou for me. Thou wast my pastor and hadst charge of my soul, and knowest me better than these men can. I will not lose the child. Speak for me.
Obviously, she was quite unhappy, and the Reverend decided to take up her case.
Look to it!
There is truth in what she says, truth in what Hester says, and the feeling which inspires her. Is not their relationship sacred? Let Pearl be her punishment and her lesson.
Hey, make it plain, Master Dimmesdale.
Dimmesdale keeps arguing until finally... You speak, my friend, with a strange earnestness. Had he not pleaded well for the poor woman?
Indeed hath he. Pearl shall stay.
So, I just want to make a note. This is a spoiler, so cover your ears and whatnot. You young folks do use your MP3 thingy-majiggies. Whatever. The Reverend Dimmesdale is Pearl's daddy. Yeah. Surprise! Changes a lot, doesn't it? Like, when you read the book, it changes how you read what Dimmesdale says. It makes sense why he says what he says. It's a real change, isn't it?
Well, it's not much of a spoiler. It's more of an enrichment, eh?
Agreed. Yeah, you're right. I wouldn't consider it too much of a spoiler. Brings out the book.
That comment, I think, leads us into the next section. In this scene, Dimmesdale is getting sicker and sicker. Now, Chillingworth is a physician, and for some reason he is bonded with Dimmesdale and offers help. Why is that? Does Chillingworth know something we don't? Or is it the other way around? We'll find out right after this break. Wait, what? Why did I say that?
You read my lines on the teleprompter.
Hi, Billy Mays here for OxyClean, the stain specialist. Powered by the air you breathe, activated by the water that you and I drink. It's Mother Nature approved.
Now, I just found out we weren't actually supposed to go in here. So, back to the book.
Of course. Now, this scene is...
It's crucial to characterization.
Yes. It's most crucial. I wouldn't really consider it a scene. It's more of a chapter with a description and two events that really bring out the true nature of both characters. The description goes on, saying as Chillingworth ages, he becomes
More evil looking.
in essence, yes. This is not aided by his disfigurement or his want for revenge.
Let me get this one. The first scene is a major breakthrough for Chillingworth's mystery and the Reverend's character. They begin chatting as friends would. Prithee, tell me the truth of my illness. Speak frankly.
Freely then, and plainly, the disorder is a strange one, not so much in itself, nor is outwardly manifested, and so fast, at least, as the symptoms have been laid open to my observation. I should deem you are a man sore sick, it may be, but you're not so sick. The disease is what I seem to know, yet know it not.
You speak in riddles, learned sir. Speak frankly.
Then to speak more plainly, and I crave pardon, sir, should you seem to require pardon. It's one having charge, under providence, and physical well-being. Had thee recounted all and fairly laid open to me?
You question it? Finally, we come, after a quick argument, to Roger leaving quite happily, as he has sorely stabbed the Reverend Dimmesdale through the soul, and has seen what he wanted.
A note must be made between...
No! After this scene, then you can state it.
Fine. My turn. The next crucial scene is when the Reverend has fallen into a deep slumber over some books. Roger sees this. He sees this as an opportunity to find out more about the Reverend's secrets. He lifts the Reverend's shirt. Of course, we shall save what he finds for later. At first, Chillingworth is horrified. But then, Chillingworth jumps with joy. And I state that he looked like Satan, when Satan has stolen a soul away from heaven.
These two scenes are most crucial to the characterization of both men.
Of course, of course.
Not only do we find out that Chillingworth is literally the devil, we also see how he becomes more and more motivated to investigate and mentally torture the Reverend Dimmesdale.
That's right. And now we find out that Mr. Dimmesdale has some secrets of his own.
Well, what are these secrets? Is it some magical power from... Ah, no. He's Pearl's daddy. He committed adultery, and now he feels guilty.
Of course, of course. Now we have reached the prime scene where we have reached the characterization. Now let's move ahead a little bit. Let's go back to 1649, where the new governor has just died. Mr. Dimmesdale has just felt a new burst of guilt of his own, and he now runs out to the platform, where Hester Prynne is presented in the very first scene.
Pearl? Little Pearl? Hester? Is that you?
It is I!
Whence comest thou hither?
I was on yonder deathbed of Governor Winthrop.
Come up hither, thou and little Pearl. We shall stand together.
Minister!
What would thou say, little child?
What's thou say to my mother and me tomorrow noontime?
But at Judgment Day shall we stand three. The light shall never see us together. What is that horror yonder? I'm very frightened.
I can tell who that is.
Worthy Master Dimmesdale, could this be you? Ah, it is. Let me lead you home. Now, obviously, Dimmesdale is guilt-stricken. And, even more obviously, Roger Chillingworth was portrayed as the devil.
Yes, it does. So, let us continue. Now, as time continues, Pearl is 7 years old, right? And Hester's crime has dulled. She's become a regular person. Like, the townspeople actually don't really care too much about her. She's just one of them. So, at this time, she reflects back onto the above scene, or the one we just talked about. She remembers how bad the Reverend looked at, how old, how dead, and how sick. And the guilt literally ate at him and made him sicker and sicker, like a cancer. So at this point, the story starts to really pick up. This is where everything starts happening. So Nate, you, pardon my frankness, let's cut to the chase and focus on the plot movement.
Of course, of course. Now, first off, Hester decides that she wants to tell the good Reverend who Roger Chillingworth actually is. Since at this point, only Hester knows that he is her husband. She meets the Reverend, and in a statement of love and passion, she tells him that she is his one friend, and that he always has her, and that the enemy, the Reverend feels is stalking him, is actually real, in the form of Chillingworth.
So normally, right about now, we'd have probably a scene playing for you guys to watch as we voice over, but the scene gets a little bit too intimate, and none of our actors were okay with it, and we personally didn't feel like showing you guys that. So we're just going to discuss it. Is that okay with you?
Of course. I completely understand. First, Hester tells Reverend about the enemy's thing, and he doesn't quite understand. I mean, then she tells him Roger was her husband, and Dimmesdale gets angry. Then, as Hester begs for forgiveness, the Reverend states that he cannot give in to her. In the act of complete passion, she shoves his face right into her bosom. She holds him there until he forgives her. Hester goes on to tell Dimmesdale to run away, but he says he shall stay and die alone. In another statement of love and passion, she whispers to him, "Thou shalt not go alone."
We pick up right here. Right after this conversation, Hester has to pick up Pearl, who's playing by the brook. Okay? Pearl is described as being in a ray of sunshine by the glistening brook. Quite some imagery. Now, you have a clear intention with this. Do you want to talk about it now or later when we actually analyze the book?
Later.
Okay then, let's finish up with the last segment.
Now this is the last scene and the climax. In this scene, Dimmesdale gives an inaugural speech. The biggest one and best one he has ever given.
Then he calls Hester and Pearl to the scaffold where the story began.
He professes his love for Hester and Pearl, shows the scar of the letter A on his chest, and dies.
A very important scene that we'll discuss later. Now, I want to talk a little about the book as a piece of literature and all the cool things that go on in the Scarlet Letter.
Of course, of course.
So, here on the literature of today and yesterday, we decide to analyze the books that we read. This is our analyzation section, so we had our staff carry out a table and some notes. So, in your book, we see a lot of, as a main topic, appearance versus reality, correct?
Absolutely. That was the main assertion of mine. Seeing as I am Hawthorne, I would know, wouldn't I?
You probably should know, shouldn't you?
But yes, there is definitely a contrast of how the main characters appear to the citizens of Salem and the character traits that the main characters have in reality.
So, of course. So, a little background. In a Puritan about this book mainly. In a Puritan society, where the morality of marriage between man and woman is a very huge thing, Hester Prynne decides to commit adultery, and in order to keep Salem pure, the villagers and the citizens want to punish Hester in front of God's eyes. Some of them even want to go as far as putting her to death for a sinful act. Although the government doesn't execute Hester, the citizens of Salem publicly humiliate her when she stands on the scaffold, displaying the letter A on her chest. Since the letter A labels Hester as an adulterer, indefinitely in the eyes of God-fearing Puritans, Hester appears to be a woman with sinful morals who is mainly a plague to Salem throughout this book.
Wow, Jeremy, you seem to really enjoy the story. Absolutely correct. Yes, because the citizens in Salem refuse to live with an adulterer who would negatively influence their pure lives, Hester is alienated from the Puritan society and forced to live in an isolated place with no one living with her, just her own daughter. However, the public's negative view of Hester doesn't stop there. The citizens bring up their children to judge Hester and her scarlet letter A as representations of sin and immorality. However, in reality, Hester is a woman with an honest and honorable nature. Although she is treated terribly by her society, Hester accepts the punishment with no rebellious spirit. Moreover, despite her sinful status, Hester devotes her service to the benefit of her community. She barely makes a living through her excellent skills in needlework, but Hester still provides food to feed the ungrateful poor. Eventually, Hester's strong ability to sympathize with the society that banished her persuaded the citizens that good could survive even in the heart of a sinner. Thus, the letter A for adulterer begins to stand for a more positive Abel. Hester is strong enough to gain respect within her community that ostracized her through her good deeds.
Huh. I see. So, Hester doesn't show the ability to bring out...
She does show the
her...
ability.
Oh, she does?
Yes.
Whoops. Well, she does show the ability to bring out her true moral self to the community through her unselfish actions. So, then how does appearance versus reality relate to, say, Reverend Dimmesdale?
Well, you see that Reverend Dimmesdale is actually quite opposite of Hester.
How so?
To the public, it seems that Reverend Dimmesdale is the most pure individual on the face of the earth. He's like a saint to the citizens of Salem with absolutely no sins in his life. Even the virgin women feel unclean in front of the famed Reverend.
Well, so that's quite the life. Man, I wish I were as well respected as Reverend Dimsdale. So then, are you saying that Dimsdale's status is well respected by the community? In reality, he feels like the worst sinner in the world?
You're headed towards the right point there, Jeremy. The citizens of Salem look up to Reverend Dimsdale as a representation of innocence and sinless life. They repent their sins in front of Reverend Dimsdale, who they revere as a direct contact to God. However, in reality, this reverend's untold sin is worse than the sins that all of the citizens share with him. Dimsdale is in fact a hypocrite. He tells others to repent their sins, which he himself fails to do. After all, it is he who should have stood next to Hester and Pearl in the scaffold in the beginning of the story.
What a terrible man. And he calls himself a minister?
Now, Jeremy, calm down now. Dimsdale tries several times to share his sins with the public during the sermon by admitting that he is a terribly sinful man. However, the public takes Dimsdale's vague confession to admit that he is impure in the eyes of the Lord as a humble trait.
Wait, so is that the reason why Reverend Dimsdale, with a strict Puritan faith, okay, whips himself in the closet during the night in order to punish himself for not repenting his sin?
Yes, exactly. The citizens think that the most honored Reverend Dimsdale will be the role model for living a peaceful life. But, as you can see here, in reality, Reverend Dimsdale lives a violent life by punishing himself severely. Not only does he whip himself, but Dimsdale also burns the letter A into a chest with a hot iron.
Hold it there, mister. Is this the reason why Chillingworth is so excited about, after uncovering Dimsdale's shirt, the letter A branded on his chest? Is that it?
Yeah. Bingo, Jeremy, bingo.
Yes, okay, so then from there, looking at the appearance versus reality thing, lives of both Hester and Dimsdale, it seems that Hester's better off, though.
Yes, because, okay, look at here. During a conversation between Dimsdale and Chillingworth, Dimsdale states that although Hester has had to go through a great deal of humiliation for adultery, she still lives a new life where she is able to slowly gain the respect and love from other citizens. I mean, in fact, even the letter A that Hester wears loses its true meaning. Therefore, Dimsdale does not think proudly of his well-respected status. Instead, Dimsdale longs to have the opportunity again to voice his confession. That's the whole reason why Reverend Dimsdale is so ill. The great guilt from the letter A on his chest seems to suck all of the energy out of his body.
So, and Chillingworth has the opportunity to, let's say, my note says, leech off Dimsdale as his doctor. Speaking of him, does he have much difference in his appearance versus reality? The only thing that I can analyze is the fact that Chillingworth appears to be friendly with Dimsdale and truly caring about the minister's failing health. I mean, the majority of the citizens hope that Chillingworth is well knowledgeable about medicinal roots and herbs that he picks all the time. They always see him do this, picking them. And they think that he's so skilled that he would cure Dimsdale. However, Chillingworth is filled with revenge and hatred for the man. Not only because he's responsible for making Hester pregnant, but because Reverend Dimsdale has not received his just punishment. But then, Nate, I'm also confused. I recently came across two different arguments about Chillingworth's treatment and Chillingworth's treatment of Dimsdale. You should check your notes.
Gosh, I would love to hear them, actually.
Okay, so let me just read this for you. Okay, so one side states that according to Dr. Jemshed Khan, Chillingworth poisons Dimsdale using atropine. And atropine slowly eats away the life of Dimsdale. Dr. Jemshid Khan argues that although Chillingworth appears to be saving Dimmesdale's life, according to the handful of citizens who believe that Chillingworth is like the devil, preying upon Dimmesdale's life, using the poison from the herbs. Okay, so that was one side. Now the other side of the argument is that instead of poisoning him, Chillingworth instead keeps Dimmesdale alive through the medicinal herbs in order for Dimmesdale to suffer through the guilt manifested in his branded letter A on his chest. So Chillingworth in this case would appear to be showing compassion and caring by treating Dimmesdale, but the reality is that Chillingworth wants Dimmesdale to be tormented by his own guilt. So what do you say about that, Nate?
Well, Jeremy, you got me there. How about we keep that as a mystery for the readers to think about on their own?
Oh, come on, Nate. You can't do that. All right, Nate. Let's just move on. How about Pearl? We're talking about Pearl for a little bit.
Well, Pearl doesn't exactly have an appearance versus reality.
What do you mean? She's full of contradictions. Like, you described her as innocent and a childlike beauty, and then have no mercy, divulging her evilish smile and evil gleam in her eye. I mean, this is a direct quote. So she also taunts her elders with hurtful questioning, such that when she asks Hester why she wears the A, or when Pearl asks Dimmesdale to stand with them at noon on the platform, I mean, there's always that evil and good right next to each other. What do you say?
Well, see, the problem is that both sides of the contradictions are reality. Pearl is less a character and more a living, breathing embodiment of the Scarlet Letter. I tried to make that clear when Hester dressed her up in gold and scarlet, just like the letter.
So let me get this straight. Pearl's creepy smiles were just Hester's own guilt and shame of wearing those letters?
Of course! And because she wasn't a true character for most of the novel, I had no issue giving her almost omniscient qualities, since the letter weighs on both Hester and Dimmesdale's minds.
Good. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our surprise. So, all of you probably shouldn't know this, but currently, a bunch of people are in the mix to make a new Scarlet Letter movie. Surprise! And right now, our off-site interviewer, Mary, is currently on set with them to ask them a couple questions. Take it away, Mary.
So here I am on set with the crew of the Scarlet Letter. Now, you've all had to have obviously read this book. How about we hear about some of the story? Okay, guys, I must ask you some questions. How about we hear your side of the story?
Well, in all honesty, I'm not a huge fan of the Scarlet Letter. See, I was called in to play the Reverend, what's his name, Dimmesdale, but he's really weak, I noticed. He's like physically sick, and his unrepented sins and stuff for nearly the entire novel, which is horrible to act. So don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the plot and everything, and the killer descriptions and stuff. But it was written as if I lived it, which is okay. I like it. It's just tough to act someone so sick and dead.
Well, I read the book. It was a little long, but I got into it. I was like, whoa. I get the scalpel man, hang myself, and I'd be an evil villain named Chillingworth. So bro, man. So the only way it could have been better if Demi Moore plays Hester again.
You didn't even read the book. You watched the old movie, Nimrod. That movie won an award for being the worst remake in existence. The Scarlet Letter is a fantastic novel and should be read, not watched. And anyways, Chillingworth is special not because his name is Bro, but because he is dynamic. From the instant you meet him, he is calm and intelligent. Despite having arrived to the square with an Indian and having a disfigurement, The surrounding bystanders feel comfortable talking and conversing with him because they can sense his cool intelligence. Comparing the stately man to the devil-like, revenge-fueled witch doctor, who we find only halfway through the novel, shows staggering differences. Chillingworth is anything but chill.
That's not true. SparkNotes doesn't say anything about that.
Well, that's why you are an actor, not a smart person. You should be glad your character is dynamic. Hester is such a drag. She is always nice, despite how cruelly the town has been treating her. Even the poor, whom she feeds and clothes in her spare time, looked down on her because of that silly A on her chest. Toward the end of the book, only towards the end of the book do they realize she's been doing for them a whole bunch of stuff all along and really start to appreciate her.
So I see reading the book isn't a prerequisite to playing a character. If I read the book, could that get me a spot in the movie? I have insightful analysis skills, especially now that I've seen a personal interview with the author and on the subject, and read the SparkNotes, of course. So, could I replace this guy?
Don't be ridiculous. You are clearly not the acting type. I mean, you could never be a real actor and stuffs. Thank you, Mary, for doing that offset interview. So, one of the benefits for being a TV show host is that I get to have a bunch of stars on this show, including Nate. So, all the way from backstage, let's welcome the actress that plays Pearl, Stephanie! Well, sweetie, Pearl is one of the most complex and confusing characters of the whole novel. What do you think about her?
I can't read yet because I'm 6 years old. But my mom says I can get a lot of money for her.
And on that bombshell, it's time to end. Thank you very much for Nate Hawthorne and the Scarlet Letter, and Stephanie for coming on stage. Next week, we'll have Old Shaky and Hamlet to review. Good night!
Here, we see the Marcel beast in its natural habitat, sleeping under a book of fiction. Notice the mustache, completely frazzled.
Several periodicals and newspapers. However, my dream was to become a novelist. But my career did not start very smoothly. Heavily rejected by the public and by the publishers.
Which was the building where I worked in. There's a pile of rubbish around the corner, and I found a Scarlet Letter A, along with a commission note by the former surveyor Jonathan Pugh. It described some events, and I just started to write a novel about those events created.
Recording. Recording.
The evolutionary concept of our style.
You? It's my home, Bromy.